School. So here is a question for you, Eric, from Twitter, a guy named @NIXREL828. And he asks, what are we going to do with regard to future relations with Korea? There's a lot in there.
So if you haven't noticed, Korea had a bit of a political meltdown. There is massive North Korea-sponsored and CCP-sponsored subversion inside South Korea to shift their government leftward. The previous president saw that, declared martial law, probably a bit clumsy in how it went down, but it was because there was a lot of funded, organized subversion to capture that government, and now they're in real political turmoil. Beyond even North Korea threat for South Korea, their biggest threat is demographic. They are collapsing. It's one of the lowest birth rates in the world, and it's like people have stopped having children. They don't date, they're not married, they don't have kids. Demographic collapse is a real possible problem for them.
And what we're seeing is a possibility that the communists could actually take over South Korea. And I know that sounds inconceivable, but the people who are now leading in the popularity polls, they are pro-North Korea, they are pro-China, they are anti-America, they're pro-communist. This is a dangerous situation because South Korea is a really important country.
An extraordinary economic success to literally climb out of a very agrarian, super poor, starving society at the end of the Korean War to one of the highest standards of living in the world, with unbelievable internet connectivity, productivity, industry. I mean, they make an enormous amount of vehicles, steel, electronics. Their aerospace industry is incredible, and I can't believe they're throwing it away.
Yeah, and that really is a situation which is hard. We've got Korea Cpac here. Talk to these people around they are fantastic. And, oh, there they are, Save Korea. You know, and the good thing, Eric, is that when conservatives in South Korea, when the conservatives in South Korea, when they rally on the streets to oppose the leftists, they fly, of course, their flag, and they fly our flag.
Well, and it's important to remember, 1953, we were still fighting against millions of Chinese communist troops there.
Yeah, and
we did fight a war. It was the Korean War after 1 million plus Chinese volunteers rolled across the Yalu River.
And that war, quote unquote, ended with an armistice, 1953. And there has been no peace treaty, which means there is still technically war on the peninsula. The North Koreans actually believe it because every once in a while they have these big terrorist events and cyber attacks all the time against South Korea. And by the way, in that armistice is China. So we are technically at war with China. There's an armistice. What's going on in China, Eric?
Look, Xi Jinping has kind of made himself dictator for life. Normally, after Mao, they were only staying for 10 years. And this last, 2-3 years ago, he changed the process, has really run an anti-corruption campaign, smashed any political opposition. It's important to remember they have political factions there as well. The Shanghai faction, the Young Princelings, he's one of those because his father was literally someone that was rolling with Mao back in the 30s already. And the Communist Youth League. Xi has smashed all that opposition. I mean, Jack Ma, who's kind of the combination of Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg all in one person, made some negative statement against the Central Bank of China.
Oh, yeah.
He was disappeared from public view, and he reappeared 6 months later lecturing at an elementary school in rural China. And the government said he had embraced supervision. So it's very Orwellian. Look, the issue with China, it's really a global competition of governance. Do we, as citizens that have rights under a constitution, under natural law, we choose our own government versus being effectively a serf under a Chinese Communist Party, very centralized rule where you have 0.0 rights. That is the global contest in governance. And so when people say, well, we're contesting China in Africa or elsewhere, it is that global competition for how shall we govern ourselves, or shall we govern ourselves, or shall we be ruled?
You mentioned China and Africa. That reminds me, a good friend of mine, Jonathan Bass of Argent LNG, had a question for you, and that was, Blackwater provided security for American companies. Now you have the Wagner Group providing security for Chinese enterprises, especially in Africa. Who is going to provide security for American businesses going forward?
Part of the issue with USAID, and I would say an over-reliance on U.S. government everywhere, doing stuff, wasting an enormous amount of money and not being very effective at it, is it really crowded out the private sector from doing a lot of those creative solutions. And I think the great thing about capitalism, if there's a demand signal, the private market will respond. And as American companies do start to go abroad for energy, minerals, infrastructure projects, American private sector will be there right there with them.
Great.
And I think a great outcome of a Trump presidency would be that these countries that are trapped in communism are actually liberated from it.
Come on, let's say it. USA! 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 Thank you, everybody.